Hi, everybody. Hello. Well, thank you for being here on a Sunday night. It is wonderful to see so many old friends and so many new faces. So thanks for coming out to play. We're here today to talk a little bit about what's going on with the intelligent enterprise. So this is me, I'm Maribel. Like many analysts in the field, I do many things. I run my research company. I also run a end-user IT and CMO community called the Emerging Technology Council with Glenn and Adam and a few other folks that are back there, so you'll get to see us all later and hear about that. And we hope that you'll join the community and spend some time sharing your insights later. And I wrote a book called Right Time Experiences, and I'll tell you a little bit about what that is in a few minutes. But without further ado, who is this man? Anyone? Close? No? This man is Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci is actually most well known, I think, for his paintings. But when you think of Leonardo, you don't think of a man that was just a painter. You think of all the amazing things that he has tried in terms of mechanics, human anatomy, painting, right? He was the original polymath, somebody who learned many skills and used those skills to reinforce his craft in other areas. Now, when I think of Leonardo, and probably when you think of Leonardo, the words genius come to mind. Over 500 years later, we are still inspired and intrigued by what Leonardo da Vinci could accomplish. But I think we often pawn it off on intellect and not really think about the long, hard work that Leonardo put into his craft, into multiple crafts, and into refining crafts. And I think that we don't really consider the fact that he was considered very controversial, unconventional, and took many risks in his time. So when I think of Leonardo, I try to think of all that. And so to that note, we're going to talk a little bit today about lessons from Leonardo on digital transformation. So I'd like to spend the rest of our time talking about three things to kind of lay a foundation for what you should be looking for and thinking about as you go through the rest of the conference. How has digital transformation changed? How is it going to change your industry? And what are some of the things that you should be thinking about to thrive in this new DX world? Now, I don't think anybody would say digital transformation is new. How many people would say digital transformation's new? Anyone? Probably not, right? So, okay, Brian Katz would say digital transformation's new because he's a rebel and his badge matches the jacket that he's wearing. Okay. And you will realize that over the course of this event, we do heckle those we know and love. Okay, so digital transformation isn't new. If we go back and think what's happened with digital transformation, this used to be a PC. That's clearly not what we think of as a PC today. Remember when this was in the 60s, we had the original video phone. Now video is everywhere. It's on your device, it's in the cloud. Mobile. Mobile used to mean you had a phone in your car, or a phone in a bag. I used to work at Motorola, and I remember when they still made bag phones, right? So mobile's clearly different now than it was then. Anybody know what this is? Bonus round? This was called a notificator, and the basic idea behind this was that you would leave a short message for someone. That person had up to several hours to come and view that message that you left them. A precursor to SMS or Snapchat? Yes. So digitally transforming for many, many years. We used to have something called timeshare computing. Now we have cloud computing. So we continue as a society and as humans to refine and evolve our ideas over time. So if digital transformation isn't new, we have to ask, what is different about digital transformation today? And I believe that there are 4 things that we should consider when we're looking at what's different today. And I'll go through each of these. So the first is around organization. Let's go back to Leonardo for a moment. When Leonardo was 15, he actually worked as an apprentice. And he worked as an apprentice in a studio where he did many different things. He did leathercraft, he did metalworking, he did carpentry, he also did painting. He worked in an organization that had multiple skills, that was highly adaptive to their customers' needs and needed to be responsive to their customers' needs in order to thrive and survive. Today, I believe what's different about digital transformation is that we have to be hyper-adaptive organizations. Now, the concept of change is not new, but change as a norm and as a state of an organization, I do believe, is different. You are currently building the equivalent of the same artist studio that Leonardo worked in. You will be delivering multiple types of products. You will be very responsive to both your customers and your employees' needs for new technologies, new services. So when I think of building an adaptive organization, that could mean you're doing work at home. It could mean you're hiring multiple contract workers. It could mean that you are looking at new technologies. It should certainly mean that you're looking at new technologies in your organization. And it should mean that you will be looking at new business models as well. So there is a great deal of change and hyper-adaptive change in the organizational structures we're looking at today. If we look at Leonardo and his mastery, you could say that he was proficient in art, anatomy, mechanics, or mechanical things, and architecture. And he took that sense of experimentation and shared learning and brought them across each of these skills. And I believe when we think of digital transformation, enterprise transformation, whatever kind of transformation you want to call this, we're looking at using a foundation of technologies that are focused on mobile, cloud computing, big data, and new ways to do analytics and processing of that data, all with an underpinning of security. So we, just like Leonardo, have to master many disciplines as well to transform our organizations in a way that is going to allow them to thrive. Oh, and we go backwards. The third thing is access. You know, in the past, when we thought about technology, technology was really something that might not have been available to everyone in your organization. So now it doesn't matter what type of workers you have or what type of customers you have. There is a good chance that they need to leverage technology to engage with you. And that access from, say, 10 to 15% of the organization all the way up to 95% of the organization or 100%, I do believe is a big change. How many people remember having a BlackBerry? How many people knew that they were the exclusive people in the organization that had a BlackBerry? All right, things have changed. Now everybody has a smartphone in their pocket as an example, or could. The other thing that's changed is speed. Speed of how we need to embrace technology, speed of our experimentation, speed of pivoting. I hate to say this thing of, fail fast, because who in the room wants to fail? None of you want to fail. What you want to do is you want to pivot quickly, and that's all about speed. And so I put this example up here. This is Infinity Red Bull Racing. And I actually wasn't a big racing fan, but I've had the opportunity to meet the CIO several times. And through those engagements with the CIO, I discovered a couple of things. Racing is actually very technical. They've instrumented the cars, they've instrumented the driver. They have to go in and set up full-scale telecom networks that link back to the UK. They have to do not just real-time, but what I would call hyper-real-time processing of data, so they know how the driver is driving. They can give him advice on how to win the race, and if they have to change a part, they can figure out what that part is and exactly when that car should come over to the pit crew to get it changed. This is massive speed and agility at work, and I think it's a great example of while we probably don't have the budgets of Infinity Red Bull Racing, we can learn much from them and apply those technologies in our organizations. So this is not without its challenges. We face a time of intense change in every way imaginable. Change everywhere. As a result of that, our technologies are changing rapidly, and we still have to manage to experiment, deploy, and thrive in a changing time. It is no longer appropriate to deliver generic services that are complex, that have the wrong data, or no data, or partial data. We need to deliver and rethink our digital experiences so that we can create what I call right-time experiences. Now, many of you have heard this before, but I think we're still in this journey of delivering the right information or service to the right person on their device of choice at the right time. I think this is sort of the holy grail of business right now. We typically have any two of those, but to have all of them together at the same time has proven quite elusive in our organizations. Now, I believe that these are different because they are contextual. They take in new data sources. These could be from mobile, they could be from IoT, they could be from cloud data sources. They are adaptive. They are adaptive to the device. They are adaptive to the location. They are adaptive to the context of the business process and what you're trying to do. They are learning over time. And when I used to say this a few years ago, people were like, learning. Now you cannot pick up a newspaper or go to a vendor event and not hear about machine learning and adaptive processes. So within 2 years' time, we have come a long way in terms of thinking about services that are learning and eventually predictive. So I said I would talk about what digital transformation is. I think we've covered that. The second thing I said I'd talk about is how some people are approaching it. Now, the good news is we just laid out a vision of what digital transformation could be. Now, we also laid out that that vision is not without its challenges. But the good news is that you are the people that's going to make that happen. You're the people that are responsible for creating digital transformation in your organization, and fortunately, you're not alone. There are people that have gone before you, that have tried things, that have taken the arrows, that have refined the processes, and it is now your job to go out and figure out what those are and how do we bring them back into our organization. So I'm just going to give you a couple of quick examples of what that might look like. So if you look at somebody like Liberty Mutual, for many people, it starts with allowing them to have access to multiple devices and allowing them to have access to data on these different devices. And once they move from there, they then just start to think, well, people want to do things differently. They don't just want an app, they want a workflow. And they just don't want that workflow to be the same workflow that they've had for the past 10 years. They want that workflow to deliver them new information. They want that workflow to analyze data from different databases, pull that all into one interface, and give them the information that they need. And they need to move fast. If we look at what's going on in healthcare, patient care has changed tremendously. We moved from people having iPads to do medical records to creating new content that could be accessed on these devices to help with the whole patient experience and understanding how they should go through their care. I'm talking to companies now in healthcare about virtual reality that will allow their patients to understand exactly what the flow of their procedure is going to be while they're at the hospital so they can get more comfortable with that. And we're doing things we couldn't do before. We're taking the hospital to different places. We're allowing people to get real-time access to care if the specialist doesn't have to be there. So that's some of what's happening in patient care. Now, along with new devices have come new ways to work and new data flows. So this could be things like clocking in and out on a device. It could be getting just the right access to customer information or sales information at the point of need. Tesco has always been a great example of a company who has moved through this concept of building right-time experiences. Now, this was many years ago when Tesco decided that they were going to take the store to the people because the people didn't have enough time to go to the store. They were also the inventor of the infamous broccoli cam. Anybody see a broccoli cam recently? Adam? No, okay. The broccoli cam was trained on the broccoli so that you would understand if the broccoli was out and you could send information to the staff to refill the broccoli. They've done much in mobile. They've done much in electronic shelf labels. They do delivery, and they're able to track the delivery, everything that's in the car, what's going on. But they're also looking at robotics and how robotics can help them eliminate inventory stockouts. Constantly pushing the envelope every year to make sure they're delivering the right experience to their customers in a low-margin, highly competitive market. We're seeing many institutions look at how this new type of technology in terms of machine learning combined with messaging and natural language processing can give us things like chatbots, can give us new experiences, such as, let me give you, in this case, a tutorial about makeup, where you want it, when you want it, understanding what the customer needs. Or you might want to know in a financial institution what your balance is, have you paid certain bills. We're talking about better, faster, easier ways to deliver care and really bringing in your customer service agents when they can deliver value and leaving the rest of the transactions into a more electronic domain. Another great example of this is, we just talked about chatbots. What about voice? Did anyone in the room actually think Amazon Alexa was going to be as popular as it was? Anyone? Okay, 2 or 3. I fundamentally missed it, didn't call it at all. What I'm seeing now is we're in an environment where there are thousands of skills that have been created by Alexa. And every organization that's really pushing the envelope that I talk to is now trying to figure out how voice changes the customer-employee experience. How do I actually move into that next level of creating simple access to information? This is an example from AmerisourceBergen with Good Neighbor Pharmacy, where you can enable the skill, you can figure out where your pharmacy is, what are the hours, you can refill prescriptions. If you're on the other side of that, you can actually start to order medications that you might need. Just a really nice, creative way of improving the customer and employee experience, or partner experience in this case. Bechtel, changing the way you deliver design for buildings. Now, we all know there's a big difference between drawing something up, putting it in a plan, and then you get to site, and it changes. So how do you prevent mistakes before it happen? And that's an essence of a different type of digital transformation, where you can save money by reducing errors. And this is using augmented reality to figure out if the plans map nicely to the physical domain. We're all very familiar with the usage-based model of progressive. I bring this up because it wasn't that long ago, but I think it's a great example of using digital technology to change how you do risk assessment, which can then fundamentally change an entire industry. Now that is considered a standard requirement. Fleet management. Fleet management isn't new. What I think is interesting about fleet management today is how many different data streams people are looking at. They want to know where not just where the truck is, but how the truck is performing. If it's being utilized correctly by the person that's rented it, how do I increase asset utilization based on knowing exactly when the truck comes back? So we're taking existing concepts in digital transformation and using newer technologies to refine them and advance them to the next level. We have many companies in the room that are moving to cloud computing. And if you went back 5 years ago, we used to debate cloud computing. And now we don't debate cloud computing. What we talk about is what type of cloud and what data goes into what type of cloud. So we've evolved that conversation to being not just public clouds, but public clouds, private clouds, hybrid clouds, and the types of data that you would have in the different variants of cloud. We're talking about companies like the Hamburg Port Authority. They woke up one day and said, we want to increase capacity by 40%, but we're a constrained port. How do we do this? You do it by finding out exactly when these big shipping containers are going to come in, what's on them, having the trucks there to unload them more efficiently, and increasing your turns. And that was their goal, and I'm proud to say for them that they are really making excellent progress at increasing the capacity they can have through this port using what we typically call IoT solutions. Okay, did anybody get in an elevator today and think, God, you know, I wonder how digital transformation's impacting the elevator industry? No? Nobody? Really? Shocking. I mean, honestly, if there's one, okay, one person? Excellent. Okay, that sums it up. All right, that makes more sense. So I've now had the opportunity to talk to several elevator companies, and I'm really amazed at how technology is transforming elevators, you know, moving us from having these little paper cards that say, yes, we've inspected you once a year, to having fully instrumented elevators so that you can know if something's going to happen to them before it does, so that you can start to order parts, so that you can actually go through the process of helping your field service engineers fix things better. If you look on the right side, there's an example of ThyssenKrupp using both AR and VR. They start with VR to visualize a repair. Then when they're on site, they can move to AR, and they've got a phone or friend option on the glasses. But having said this, just tremendous change in how elevator companies think about sensors, instrumentation, advancing what the field service folks can do with a combination of technologies. You've got Coke in the room. I thought I saw Coke in the room. Neil, yeah. And you've got Pepsi. And both of them are actually moving forward and changing vending machines, and not just for figuring out things such as maintenance and stockouts, but fundamentally changing the customer care experience, what you can do, how you can personalize your experience with these organizations. Everything from gaming to being able to figure out your perfect formula of soft drink. Many of you experienced Disney Magic Band. This is a great example of I need to improve operations management in the park. I need to get more people on more rides faster, but I also need to make sure that they buy more stuff and that I understand what they're doing and that they don't lose their children. All good things, right? Great example of digital transformation. Huge amount of money involved, but we can learn a lot from how they use location-based services, how they think about promotioning, how they think about analytics, and the lifetime value of a customer over many, many trips to the park. John Deere, not just an equipment company, but a data company. They can help their customers figure out when to plant, how to plant, what equipment to use. They are a great example of somebody that's moving into providing data as a service to their customers. And Hitachi, not just looking at selling trains, but instrumenting trains originally for maintenance, and now doing new business models such as rail as a service in the UK, where the UK, certain aspects of the UK have not purchased trains, they're actually purchasing uptime of trains. So I said I would talk to you about some advice. And I think one of the things that we all need to think about, I've had to think about this quite a bit in my career, and I encourage you to think about this quite a bit in your career. And this is the concept of developing new skills and minding what we call the gap. I think each and every one of us have to be very specific about making sure that we understand all of the technology changes upon us, not just within our domain, but within adjacent domains. Because I think things are changing fast, and I think your roles will change. The job you have now will not be the job you have 5 years from now. And that 5 years will come much faster than we thought, and it could even be a year. If we go back to when Phil, Paul, and I were talking about ET, ET just talked about, that at that point is M6. It just talked about mobile. And now what are we talking about? We're talking about data and analytics and cloud computing and machine learning. And these are things that we need to know when we walk in the room. And these are things that if we know, we have the opportunity to advance our position and advance our companies at the same time. So I'd like to take a lesson from Leonardo here when we think of Leonardo as a polymath. You know, why did Leonardo get interested in anatomy? He wanted to be a better painter. And he felt in order to be a better painter, he needed to understand more about the human body. And he used that as an opportunity to reinforce his painting skills and also had a fascination with it at the same time, right? We're going to talk a little bit about this mechanics and anatomy. But what I'm suggesting to you is that you become more of a polymath than you have in the past. And the other thing that Leonardo did very well that I don't think we talk too much about is, in a way, there are no new problems under the sun. We have similar problems, we have new technologies. Leonardo was very good at looking at old problems and trying to solve them in new ways. For example, if we look at the concept of trying to create flight, how many people at that time, or before that time, and then after his time, were fascinated with the concept of flight and being able to fly as humans? Many people. So he took the concept of old problems, applied new technology to them, and looked at them in new ways. He actually used to break up things like the mechanical parts of things, try to figure out how each part worked, because he felt if he figured out how each part worked, he could reassemble them into different parts that would do something better or different. And I think this is a lot of what we talk about now with creating microservices and composable apps, very similar concepts. The other thing I think is that digital transformation is a journey. I've said this before, I'll say it again. I think you start by extending certain things, you then move to enhancing, and you move to evolving. But what I've seen happen now is these aren't a nice little linear up curve. You have to extend your existing products while you're trying to figure out what you enhance with things like, say, location-based services, contextual services, new data sources. And then you also have to figure out what 5% of the projects are you going to work on that are really going to evolve your business and move you forward. And this actually requires 3 types of change: people change, process change, and technology change. And we don't talk a lot about the first 2. But those are where you really get hung up. I'm reading a book now called The 4 Disciplines of Execution, and that doesn't mean 4 ways to kill people. It actually, I know what you guys were thinking. It actually means, you know, coming up with things like what's your really important goal, and what are the lead goals that are going to take you there, not the lag measures. And a lot of those are about how do you get the people inspired? How do you give them things that are actionable every week, goals that aren't too big? And that's a people and process change. And then when you think of DX and you think of creating something new is something new. It's not the same process you had before. So that's why I think we need adaptation. I think a baseline of what you're doing is a must, and what I mean by baseline is there are many different tools you can find to have inventory, expense management, mobile device management, mobile application management, cloud service management. You need to know what's going on. You need to know if it's secure. You need to know if there's shadow IT or innovative IT or other things that you need to get a handle on and move forward. I think you need to think about the application and process change. People are moving from waterfall to agile, and some people are talking about continuous delivery and microservices and composable services. So think about how your apps could change and how you could create components that would reinforce each other and be those Lego blocks. You have to look at new services. How can the cloud improve your overall process change? Is it dev test environment? Is it platform as a service? Is it SaaS? Is it data as a service? You have to look at possibly building new models. Many of you in this room will have to start building an as-a-service business that might complement a physical product that you have. And some of you might have data as-a-service businesses. You have to figure out what you're going to connect in your organization, how you're going to add value with external data sources. This could be weather, pricing, tax information. All kinds of different services are available or different databases. What you're going to buy and what you're going to sell. You have to start evaluating how machine learning could change what you do. This is actually really a pretty nascent area. It's talked a lot by the vendors, but what I'm seeing as I dig into it and really dig into it, you still have to do a lot of heavy lifting, but you can get kick-started with a bunch of cloud services that are out there today, but you really need to know what you want to do to make those worthwhile. None of this happens unless it's secure, and I think the latest ransomware attacks really prove that. It's been a couple of bad weeks, right? So we want to make sure that we're not exposing ourselves, and the best thing you can do in that regard is get on newer technology. Many of the vulnerabilities come from having legacy solutions that we failed to patch or can't patch. And like Leonardo was always experimenting. And I think that we need to get comfortable with this concept of experimentation and that experiments don't always go right. So for example, many people experimented with Google Glass. I had an interesting discussion with Boeing about this recently. And they're actually thinking, well, they've tried many different things, but they're still on the concept of the glass as a really good thing for delivering different experiences in terms of design, in terms of repair. The question is, how do you implement it? Because innovation doesn't end. You may be innovative today, but you have to continue to innovate. I use an example of Uber here, and there's many issues with Uber now, certainly. But having said that, they started off with one innovation, but they continue to think about new ways to advance their services. And I think I'd like to start to close by saying that I think small changes have big impact. Sometimes in digital transformation, it becomes very much a boil your ocean set of problems. And what you really want to do is try to break it up and make one or two things better each time. Get feedback. You have the ability to introduce something, rapidly iterate on it, get feedback from your employees, from your customers, from your partners, and build something that really matters in your organization. I talked a little bit about Leonardo. I talked a little bit about what he was doing in terms of polymath and allowing one thing to help him build another thing more effectively with the painting. But he also actually made some interesting career moves in his time. At one point, he decided that perhaps being a painter wasn't going to be enough. So he actually, when he was sent on an art commission, decided that he was going to showcase some military designs so that he could become a military architectural and artistic advisor. And to me, he did this before he could know, but he just mocked these up. These weren't things that he knew would work. And what's really interesting about this is he was taking control of his career. He was managing his process to say, I want to make sure that I'm included in the next thing. I don't know how to do the next thing, but I'm going to convince people that they need to give me a try. And so for you, I think what's interesting about this is you should always be looking at what's the next thing. And you might not know how to do it yet, but you can certainly convince somebody that if they give you the chance, you'll make it happen. So don't wait until it's already gone and everybody knows how to do it. Jump right in there and make it happen for you and make it happen for the organization. Because chances are nobody else knows how to do it either. Will Smith used to say this. You guys remember the actor Will Smith? Will Smith basically had a very similar story. He basically talked to the guy that was the Fresh Prince, and the Fresh Prince guy said, do you act? Well, he didn't act. He never acted. He's like, oh, yeah, heck, I act. And like, all right, so we'll talk. And he learned it on the way, right? And became a very popular star. So I think we all have this opportunity in us. Collaborate. After Leonardo could build his own shop, he still worked with Verrecchio for quite some time. So when you have the opportunity, make sure you're collaborating with people so that you can improve your skills. Many of you might know that Leonardo used to write basically backwards. Some people thought this was a mysterious thing. Other people have said, well, that's just how he learned to do it, and nobody ever corrected it. But when he needed to actually send letters of introduction, he frequently had somebody else write them for him. He would tell them what to write so that they could actually be understood, since this is probably not the easiest thing to understand back in that day. So this is my concept of being true to your own way, but asking for help when you need it. And like Leonardo, I think you should always be looking ahead. Look for what's next. Be the agents of change. It's up to you. And this is me. You'll see me over the course of the next 2 days. I look forward to talking to you. Thanks so much for your time and attention.